Although introduced as a sport fish over 100 years ago, salmon farming is a relatively young industry in New Zealand. Chinook, also known as king salmon, is a Pacific salmon species and the only one sea farmed here. New Zealand king salmon is a major supplier of farmed Pacific salmon. Their Takaka plant was developed as a hatchery and breeding facility when the production of salmon there became uneconomical. The focus is now on producing premium quality eggs and smolt to service king salmon's farms in the Marlborough Sounds.
New Zealand king salmon has by far the largest market share of king salmon in New Zealand. That's one of the Pacific species. We're producing approximately 9,000 tonnes a year. The annual production for the country, I would guess, would be at around sort of 12 to 15,000 tonnes. On a global basis, the rest of the world, most of the rest of the world farms Atlantic salmon. There's up to 1.5 million tonnes of that farm. We aren't big players internationally in terms of volume, but in terms of what we're producing, absolutely we have a niche there because very few people around the world are farming king salmon. The process starts here with our breeding stock, and so our breeding stock are kept in freshwater for whole of life. We have a breeding program which enables us to manage the best performance of those fish whilst managing the inbreeding risk. And what we do is do all the spawning in freshwater here, and then those eggs are then reared up to produce the young smolt, as they're called, which we put out into the sea pens. And obviously every year we produce the next generation of breeding stock. The smolts are moved from here to the sea farms in trucks. So they are truck and trailer units, look a bit like milk tankers, but they've got compartments in them. We pump the fish in, and the trucks drive over to Picton and actually go onto a barge on the wharf and then out to the sea farms where they are then dropped into the sea pens. The farm takes its water from the outlet of Waikato Springs, which are world-renowned as the clearest water in the world. It's really good for salmon farming partly because of its temperature, which is a constant 12 degrees or thereabouts, which is about in the middle of the ideal range for rearing salmon. It's also clear all year round, so any time of the year, any season, we know our fish are going to perform. In terms of the amount that we're allowed to take, we have our resource consent, which allows us to take a set amount of water based on a formula. We tap off that and it returns to the river after the farm, goes through a settlement pond. The testing of that water, again, as part of our resource consent, is done on a 2-monthly basis, and we have to comply with standards for suspended solids, BOD, dissolved oxygen, and that all gets recorded and then reported annually. This is our wasabi patch. It was started off as an experiment about 15 years ago with a view to perhaps marketing some wasabi with our salmon. That never took off, but what it does demonstrate is the quality of our water coming through the farm. So we're at the bottom of the farm now, at the outlet, and this wasabi is growing in water that's been through our fish ponds. So it's thriving in that. We've got wasabi beds that were put in here, gravel beds, so it's filtering through the gravels and growing the wasabi at the same time. The reason we got the fence around the farm was about 5 years ago we were finding some of our fish were getting eaten by some mysterious thing, and we couldn't see what it was. And then early one morning, one of the guys saw a seal in the farm, which had swum up from the sea, which is about a couple of kilometres away, and its mates were hanging around for a couple of weeks, so we had to do something about it. So we built a fence. And since then, we've not had any problems. These fish are being graded for size. They're being crowded up in this net, lifted up with this auger, down into this mechanical grader, which has got twin belts. And depending on the gap between the belts as it moves along as to where the fish falls through, so that the grade is by girth rather than weight. And so that way we can split them into different groups. Fish perform better when they are growing in populations of a closer size. These fish were last year's spawning, so they spend 12 months here at the hatchery. They'll be going out to the sea pens in the next couple of months. These fish are a young smolt. They're just being graded. I'm just doing a quick check on the quality of them. They are about 30 to 50 grams. They could actually go to sea pens right now if we wanted to, but we hold them till they're a bit bigger. I'm just making sure that we've got the right sort of quality there. Yeah, these are good-looking fish. The smolt here are now being stocked into their raceways so that they'll reach their maximum density when they leave the farm in the next month or so. So we're approaching the end of the cycle, and really our measure is the size and condition they're at when they leave here to go out to the grow-out pens. And then ultimately, of course, the measure will be how they perform in the sea, and at the point when they're harvested in about 12 months from now. Well, at King Salmon, we have a selective breeding program that's been running for about 15 years. And the aim of that is to benefit from the best performance traits of our breeding stock whilst managing the inbreeding risk. So to that end, all our breeding stock are individually tagged with a pit tag. And whenever we handle those fish, we can scan them and identify which fish is which, and then start building up a profile of those fish. So when it comes to spawning time, we can select the best males to put with the best females whilst managing the risk of inbreeding. So we anaesthetise the fish using a substance called aqueous, which was developed by Crop and Food in New Zealand for the seafood industry. It's got an active ingredient of isogenol, which is the same ingredient you find in clove oil. And it's safe to use on the fish. It's anaesthetised them very quickly, they come round very quickly. It's the same we use during our harvest process. 13050. What we have here are what we call pit tags. These are passive integrated transponders, little glass capsule with a wire code inside it. And these are inserted into our breeding fish when they're about 25 grams. So they're really quite small, inserted with a hypodermic. And that stays inside the fish, so it's between the gut and the gut wall, and that will stay with it for the rest of its life, till it either dies or until we spawn from it, and then we recover the tag. And any time we want to identify that fish, we can then scan it, and it will pick up the tag, and we then know what fish it is, what family it's from, and we can start recording information on it. So none of these go into the food chain, they're purely just for our breeding fish. One of the key differences between the king salmon that we have in New Zealand and the Atlantic salmon, the rest of the world farms, is in their breeding cycle. King salmon, being one of the Pacific species, dies after it's spawned. So these fish are now essentially on their final run towards spawning, after which they will die. Unlike Atlantic salmon, which naturally don't die after spawning and can potentially go around again.
This program was made with funding from New Zealand On Air.